Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please allow me to introduce our second panel moderator, Dr. Joseph J. Thomas. Dr. Thomas is a Lakeville Family Foundation Distinguished Military Professor of Leadership and Senior Fellow in the Vice Admiral James B. Stockdale Center for Ethical Leadership. In retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel, his assignments included 1st and 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing, 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit, Marine Aviation Weapons and Tactics Squadron 1. Dr. Thomas is a graduate of Marine Corps Command and Staff College and a past recipient of the Major General Merritt A. Edson Leadership Award, the Marine Corps Association Research and Writing Award, and the Colonel Donald Cook Distinguished Graduate Award of Command and Control Systems School. He was an assistant professor of naval science at the University of Notre Dame, as well as a 6th Battalion officer at the U.S. Naval Academy. Furthermore, he's the author of numerous articles on the subjects of command and control, military training, and education and leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, our moderator, Dr. Joseph Thomas.
Thanks, Ryan. I'd like to really start by congratulating Ryan and his entire team for all the efforts to this point. From yesterday morning's kickoff speaker, Mr. Stan Smith, through Governor O'Malley yesterday evening, I mean, I've personally learned a great deal, and I hope all of you have too. I'd like to particularly congratulate Ryan and the team that's kind of pulled this whole thing together for today's panel. Today's panel is an absolute collection of true expertise for the given topic that we have today of recruiting, retaining, and building generational leaders. They could not have picked a more appropriate group for this particular task. Now, collectively, the gentlemen to my left and right represent over 120 years of leadership experience, as well as human resource true experience and expertise. You'd be hard-pressed to find a more seasoned group than this particular group we have gathered here. With 2 members from public service and 2 members from the private sector, they have perspective that spans virtually every aspect of leading diverse workforces and large organizations with very distinct missions. Now, individually, each of our panelists has a compelling story to tell. Each is at the very top of their respective professions and possesses insights critical to all of us trying to get our arms around the unique challenges of generational leadership. It is because of this tremendous opportunity to learn from the subject matters, I'm going to kind of dive right in, really take advantage of this opportunity and toss out a few questions that were kind of left on the table through yesterday's events, and then hopefully throw the second half of our short time here together this morning out to you for some questions that seemed to work pretty well yesterday. Now, our first panelist to my immediate left is Rear Admiral Joseph Kilkenny. He's a native of Philadelphia and graduate of the Citadel. As a naval aviator, he's flown a variety of tactical jet aircraft during his career, to include the A-6 Intruder, the EA-6B Prowler, F-14 Tomcat. He's commanded at the squadron and wing levels. As a flag officer, his assignments have included Special Assistant for Naval Aviation's Human Capital Strategy, pertinent to the topic today. In 2005, he was a Joint Force Maritime Component Commander for Joint Task Force Katrina and Rita in the Gulf of Mexico, and his current assignment is Commander, Navy Recruiting Command, an organization of 7,200 personnel to include over 5,200 recruiters at 1,500 recruiting stations around the world. Welcome, Admiral Kilkenny. I'd like to also, to his left, introduce Mr. Wayne Wielgus. Currently serves as the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Celebrity and Azamara Cruises and has over 25 years experience in the hospitality industry. Celebrity Cruises has a total of 29 ships in service and 1 under construction. 7 of Celebrity's ships were in the top 10 of Condé Nast's World's Greatest Ships survey, and Azamara Cruises offers deluxe, out-of-the-ordinary cruises experience to travel enthusiasts. Mr. Wielgus' past experience includes Vice President for Marketing for Best Western International with responsibility for over 4,100 hotels in 84 countries, and Choice Hotels International, where he had strategic leadership responsibility for 5,300 hotels in 42 countries. So welcome, Mr. Wielgus. To my right is the co-founder, Mr. Brian Hackett, co-founder of Apex Performance, an organization that provides the science behind the art of leadership and development and peak performance. Apex works with business, sports, education, government, and medical professionals through a combination of executive coaching, personalized training, and advanced biofeedback technology in order to enhance communications, decision-making, problem-solving, and attention control. Mr. Hackett also serves as the director of the Learning Forum a network of over 120 senior executives from Fortune 500 companies worldwide. So welcome, Mr. Hackett. And then finally, on the far right, your far left, Mr. Willie A. Harrison. He's a Deputy Program Director for the Office of Personnel Management's USA Jobs Program Office. USA Jobs is a single-source website for employment in the federal government. Mr. Harrison brings over 38 years' experience in leadership and human resources development from the U.S. Army, the private sector, and since 2004, the federal government. Now, I got a chance to talk to a few folks in the audience yesterday who are interested in public service careers. Well, Mr. Harrison's probably a pretty good guy to get to know, since USA Jobs is kind of the portal into federal service on the non-uniform side. So he offers expertise there. So welcome, Mr. Harrison. I mentioned there was a few things that were left on the table yesterday, and I think we're going to kind of start with those before we throw it out to general questions. And that was the issue of defining the so-called millennial generation. I don't know if everyone caught it, but in Governor O'Malley's presentation yesterday, he actually asked everybody gathered over there in Alumni Hall as to whether they considered themselves millennials. And we saw by the basic reaction there that not everybody necessarily considers themselves by that particular bumper sticker, I suppose, it's been applied to your generation. So with that in mind, I would ask our panel, we'll start with the Admiral this morning, how they fundamentally differ, if we even accept that there is a distinct entity known as the millennial generation, and how they differ from the predecessors, if at all, and what does this mean to the recruitment effort, I suppose. Admiral.
Good morning. Hopefully I don't knock the mic down, but thank you for being here. In command of Navy Recruiting Command, just so you have a rough idea, my goal of enlisted, active, officer, and reserve is around 55,000 people per year, what I'm trying to recruit to bring in the Navy. It's pretty funny when we get into the generational differences. I was talking to the moderators today, and I also wanted to tell you that if you want to sail on some great ships, you're probably going to be on different ones, and the gentleman to the left is providing you there in Celebrity Cruise Lines. But you'll get to see a lot of the seas in the Navy and do some great things. I use a pretty great example for generational differences. I happen to have two sons. One's 25 and one's 30. They are completely different from each other. My 25-year-old is a text messaging fiend, so I know that many of you, when I got to recruiting duty, I asked how many of my recruiters had the ability to text message on their cell phone. You know what the answer was? None. Well, how are you going to be in communication with the young people you're trying to recruit to come in the Navy when you don't have the same tools that they're out there using day in and day out? They now have unlimited text messaging on their cell phones, which is a great thing, because you all, I'm sure, carry a cell phone. Many of you all have text messaging. But I want to talk a little bit about the generational differences and whether you think you're in one category or not. I looked at this and thought about it a little bit. Today's younger generation, which I will use as primarily my 25-year-old, my 30-year-old's doesn't quite consider them to be that young anymore, but a couple things are amazing. This generation has a very close connection with their parents. Very close connection. We joked about that this morning. When I was growing up, my dad and I had a close connection, but it wasn't always on a professional level. I didn't ask my dad's advice for lots of things, and many times he was dictatorial in nature of what he wanted to do. I find that the young people today collaborate a great deal with their family and their parents, and they consequently are very big influencers in their lives. And I think that's a great thing. We also have known the new generation is called the helicopter parents, because they spend a lot of time hovering around their children. And I can tell you that's pretty spot on, even though my 25-year-old's on his own. I spend a lot of time with him and his career and what he's attempting to do. You're the most diverse generation the Americans have ever seen. At least 40% are not Caucasian, and many, at least 20%, have at least one immigrant parent, which I think is very important. Your interests are colorblind. Your beliefs, opinions, and choices are not based on racial grounds, but more on common interests, which I think is huge. You've embodied the fusion lifestyle, embracing diverse music, food, cultures, and ethnic backgrounds. You're the most praised generation, and you live comfortably. This is the key one. I think you live comfortably in both the real and virtual world. Their best friend may be on Facebook with a friend in another continent that they've never personally met in their entire life. They're more optimistic and hopeful than many of your predecessors. And as I said earlier, you're the most technologically savvy. You're referred to as digital natives as opposed to somebody like me who would be a digital immigrant. I'm still figuring out Twitter, believe it or not, but I do get on there and try and see what is the next great thing. But you are well connected. That said, what I think sets the generation apart is it is a generation that truly wants to make a difference in the world that we live in. And so if that's what you want to do, many of us up here, you're going to have to sit down and decide what it is that you want to do. I can tell you I've been in the Navy coming up on 32 years, and I've made a difference in many ways. Not only have I been a warrior, I fought in Desert Storm. Whether you believe in it or you don't, I was there, and I was basically dropping ordnance on bad people over there. But I also helped our own countrymen in Hurricane Katrina. And I find it that I can live in both those worlds very easily based on my upbringing, what I've been taught to do. When need be, we can be the force that has to happen to reckon with bad people in the world. And when we have to be, Americans can be and are the most generous, uplifting, warm, and loving people in the world. It's just, unfortunately, we're misconstrued by many people out there. They don't know who we are. So that's kind of my thoughts on the millennial generation. I think you all want to make a difference. You all are technically savvy. You're all going to have lots of options, although I'm sure you're all watching the news. We were discussing it today in the job market out there, and it's going to be a little challenging. But I will tell you this, that if you have the right skill set and the desire to do great things, that you will find employment and you will do something. All I ask for, the one area my dad did tell me about that we got along pretty much spot on is he said to me, whatever you decide to do in your life, make sure you like it because you're going to be doing it a lot. And that's absolutely spot on. I know you may change jobs from time to time, but your core value and your core culture of what you might want to do will remain the same. So I look forward to answering some of these other questions and then open it up to you all and what you think is on your mind with today's, and I want to talk a little bit in the next half about leadership, as I think that's what your conference is all about, and I want to talk about a few key elements of leadership that have served me well in 32 years, and I think they could do the same for you no matter what job you decide to go into. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Admiral. Now, as the Admiral mentioned, Mr. Wielgus, I think, is responsible for strategic leadership of a fleet of a different sort, I suppose, with Celebrity and Azamara cruise lines. But I think many of the challenges for recruitment are probably pretty similar, particularly bringing in the young workforce and retaining them on top of that. So some of your thoughts on this task.
Good morning, everybody. It really is very much the same in terms of how we go out and recruit. We actually have 45,000 staff on our ships, so and about another probably 15,000 onshore. Out of the 45,000, we recruit from 80 different countries to fill our ships. So we do clearly go all over the world, touch so many different nations, and have to really think about different cultures even. It's not just sitting here and you know, the fact that you might be an American or you might be Hispanic, you might be from Latin America, you might be from Europe, that we have to cross all those bridges and really deal with people at various age groups too. And it's kind of unique that, you know, one of the things that we try not to do is obviously make faux pas or mistakes in terms of how we deal with people. And whether you're the millennials or you're a Generation X, I think the key is the ability to work with a company that really cares, is passionate about what we do and delivering what we do, and that you feel that way too. That's not unlike what was just said when we talk to people, is why do you want to become part of the celebrity brand, and not only a chance to see the world, but you're going to also meet so many diverse people, because our customer base comes from around the world as well. And just to touch on some of the things that we see that are quite different is, yeah, I'm connected like all of you are connected, but again, it wasn't part of me growing up. I had to adapt, I had to learn. Technology for the millennia age group is something that you're born with. From the time that you can walk and talk, technology is a very easy thing for you to adapt to, and that's something that's very enticing for us in the cruise line, is to have people that have that technological background, because we are dealing with sophisticated equipment. We're also dealing with people from around the world, and also having to communicate around the world. The things that I would say that also differ is the fact that there's a lot less verbal communication and a lot more text communication from this age group that we have to learn about, because I think Gen Xers, and I'm a baby boomer, and we tend to want to communicate more verbally with people than through text, and actually find it in some ways actually time consuming. I'm probably not going to get the figures right, but the average person thinks at 300 words a minute. You speak at about 150 words a minute, you type at about 60 words a minute, and you actually write at about 20 words a minute. So if you write or you text, we feel you're almost, in our baby boomer generation, that you're probably 5 times slower in terms of communicating than you are if you really looked at, just getting up and communicating what you want to say. But again, we understand that's how the millennials have grown up, and we've got to adapt to it as well. And also vice versa. I don't think it's going to be one way or the other going in the future. I think as you come into the workforce, you'll start to see that there is going to be a lot of times where verbal communication is going to be, not only better in terms of being able to get a point across, but a heck of a lot more efficient as well. The other things that we see, obviously, is that it's just more of a team mentality. The millennials really want to collaborate. They want to be part of a team. They want to understand why you're doing something, not just the how and when. Again, so we do a lot of teamwork and case study and work together as a group, and we actually expose our new employees to get involved with more senior people that are on the job, so that they can learn quicker and faster, sit in on meetings, understand strategic thoughts, so that when we are making decisions going forward, whether it is for marine operations or marketing, or whether it's for hotel operations, because that's what the hotel is, a hotel on water, that we want the younger generation or our new employees to be up to speed a lot faster, and we think we're getting that kind of feedback as well, that they want to be part of something that is not only career building, but also allows them to have input along the way. And that's just some of the observations. The difference also that we're seeing between traditionalists, a baby boomer, a Generation X, and whether you call yourselves a Generation Y or whatever, is traditionalists are really loyalists. They went to companies, they worked for 30 years, they got their pension, and off they went. And my generation came in very much so as boomers, and very optimistic about our challenges in life and what we were going to do, and creating a different path. And I think the Generation Xers came in and really kind of changed some of the optimists' thinking, and became, we're much more skeptics about the things that were going on in the world. And I think one of the things that I think the millennials have, or Generation Y, what you all have going forward for you, is the history that you can learn from what's happened from the people before you. But I think also it gives you a perspective to become more realist and realistic about what's going on in the world because of your connection in the world. And again, I think those are things that our generation didn't have the same effect of connectivity around the world that you do today. And I think that's a huge positive to understand what's happening, across the world, more so than any of us have ever had growing up, instantaneous. And as the Admiral said here, that you can have friends from across the world. We never had that ability to do that. I mean, we really made friends in a smaller group and kind of built it from a networking on a business by business. And if you traveled internationally, instantaneously now you can talk to people and get information that we just didn't have in the past. So I think that's a huge positive too going forward for the millennial class.
Yeah, and the speed of performance, an interesting point, and how that changes. That kind of fits nicely into Mr. Hackett's expertise, what he brings to the panel. Since performance enhancement is a large part of what Apex actually does. So your observations from where you sit.
Well, in this new economy, first of all, performance is going to be critical. There's no room for non-performance. And frankly, in a lot of businesses, there's a lot of non-performance. Little background, I too have a 25-year-old and a 27-year-old. I run 3 businesses and 1 nonprofit. That's something that's different about this age, that you can literally run 3 different businesses at the same time. And so one of those millennials, my 27-year-old, actually is an employee of mine. So I have real first-hand knowledge of dealing with. But the interesting thing is they don't even use the word millennials. They don't even think about it in those terms. I think some of the things that the Admiral mentioned, I'd echo. The helicopter parents is a real situation. I work with those 120 HR execs at large companies, and it's amazing to hear the stories about how parents are involved with the recruiting and the performance management of their kids. It's just a new, and I think it's a good thing that they're connected, but it's also an issue that's new for employers. I mean, literally, a lot of employers are recruiting the parents to get the kid they want in their company. I've had stories where the parents wanted to talk to the CEO, and the CEO did it to have that kid join that company. I think what's really also really different is this is a tough world you're going into. It was a lot easier for us. It was more certain. This is a world where it's uncertain. For you leadership gurus, I would Google the concept VUCA, V-U-C-A. It's a concept the Army War College came up with when they were thinking about strategy in this world. And it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And the whole point is it's asynchronous warfare time. There are no front lines. But this is the same world of business we're in now. I mean, look at this banking crisis. Nobody really knows what's going on. And so the level of stress is different. Level of stress for high school kids is higher than it's ever been. You can look at all the data for the symptoms that show up, but that's what's one thing that's different. There is a healthy lack of trust, which is a good thing, but the same generation really wants loyalty, and they want to work. A lot of people say they don't want to work for a company for a long time. That's actually not true. Most of the younger generation do want to work for one place for a long time. It's just that the companies haven't been able to give them that deal. I think I'll also agree with the diversity issue. This is definitely not only the most diverse ethnically, but it's also the most diverse as far as open to the notion of diversity of thought, which is another good thing. This technology issue is also a main difference for this generation. I mean, the fact that, one, you can be so connected with text messaging and other things, but also things like Facebook. And the younger generation has an interesting opportunity because they can use these tools to market themselves. And unfortunately, a lot of younger generation just aren't conscious of how poorly they market themselves sometimes with things like Facebook. But the smarter ones realize, they have an opportunity. So they're really conscious about their presence on the web. The other thing is they're more open. Because of the web, they're more open about sharing things. They share things about how they get paid and where to go work. I mean, for companies recruiting, you better be totally honest and do a good job, because there are no secrets anymore. People tell, like you'll get on the web and you'll talk about, who's a good professor at your college, right? And the same thing happens with who's a good employer. And the same thing happens with who's a good leader. Even in the military, these guys are online. They're talking about who's a good leader or not. So to think that there are any secrets or this isn't all open, you really have to learn to adjust to lead these people. But I think those are some of the kind of key differences that I see with this other generation. I also, again, going back to the real big difference is the next few years, it's just going to be a lot harder, period. But it's also a time where I think there's more of a sense of hope as well. So I think that in the next round, we can talk about how to actually deal with some of these things as a personal leader.
Yeah, good point. Speaking of volatility, uncertainty, chaos, and ambiguity, I suppose the federal government is anticipating kind of a bow wave over the course of the next few years of retirement, essentially the boomers that we've been talking about. So there's an absolute critical need for recruiting the next generation, whether we call them Generation Y or millennials, whatever the case may be, into federal service, from the intelligence agencies to the State Department to Health and Human Services. And Mr. Harrison's perspective as one of the primary recruiters for that effort to kind of answer that bow wave, I think is also essential for us to get our arms around these issues of recruitment and retention. Mr. Harrison.
Hey, thank you. First of all, put your pencils down, put your pens down, okay? You need to listen. You'll remember. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about you. Whether you want to be in a particular group or not, it doesn't really matter. I didn't want to be a baby boomer, but I am. And they say that the boomers have certain characteristics, and whether I want to own it or not, I'm it. And I can't get away from that. But the world changes. I have a house full of millennials. My oldest is 32. He's a Special Forces operator now in Africa somewhere, and he did what I did. I'm a retired Army officer, Lieutenant Colonel. I did 28 years in the United States Army, and I did 28 because I didn't want to do 29. I left the Army and went into the private sector and was a consultant in HR strategies, whatever that means, and did that for quite a while, always on the recruiting and retention side. I have a young son who's 23, and I have two daughters in the middle who are 30 and 27, I believe. And we have experienced quite a bit, and I have a wife. I think that's important. What I'm going to do is rapidly throw some things at you that talks about Gen X, Gen Y, that probably doesn't fit any of you. And on the other end of Gen X, Gen Y is baby boomer, and all of these characteristics have proven over time and through all of the various studies and whatnot to be absolutely accurate. You won't identify with all of them, you'll identify with some of them, but basically Gen Xers, there's about 50 million Gen Xers. There's about 80 million millennials. Gen Xers accept diversity. Millennials celebrate diversity. Gen Xers are pragmatic and practical. Millennials are optimistic and realistic. Gen Xers are self-reliant and individualistic. Millennials are inventive and individualistic. So a little bit more creativity there. Gen Xers and some boomers kind of reject rules. Millennials rewrite rules. Gen Xers mistrust institutions. don't really trust them. You know, they've been around a long time, and yeah, it's okay for you. Millennials think that institutions are irrelevant. Now, Gen Xers use technology, and millennials assume technology. I can't believe you don't text. I can't believe you don't do this. I can't believe your website is crummy. Why doesn't it do what it should do? It should be intuitive. You know, why do I have to think about how to do those types of things? Gen Xers came up with the term multitask. They multitask. Millennials multitask fast. Gen Xers were latchkey kids. Parents were working, they had a little key around the neck, they went home after school and they did whatever they did. Not so with the millennials, because I guess it was parental guilt. So millennials were nurtured in daycare centers. Gen Xers were, you were a friend or you were in the family. Millennials have a tendency to say, my friend is my family. And a lot more open and sharing. And I said all that to say that when you look at the characteristics, there are similarities, obviously, and there are differences. There are institutions. And in my line of work, I work for the HR director for the President of the United States. We are responsible for making sure that the civilian workforce is quality and qualified and competent. However, we're working with rules that were created in 1940. And it is one of my biggest frustrations. We can open our arms and we can recruit the best and the brightest, and we disappoint them because we can't do it fast enough. As I look out here at the crowd here, what I see is a lot of bright eyes and focused and interested young people who we need in the civilian workforce, who we need in the federal government, because we need your ideas. We need your energy. Some of the rules that were created, and we have some wonderful programs across the federal government. We have about 400, actually there are over 400 federal agencies. I deal primarily with 112 of them. The 24 cabinet level agencies, obviously, and the sub-agencies associated with them. And we have a quick civics lesson. We have competitive service agencies, which means that you have to follow all of the rules, and if you announce a job to the public, everybody has to be treated fairly and graded, and there has to be classifications for experience and education and skill sets and all of those things, that all those qualifications that you have. And then we have the accepted service, who are special. They have special rules for hiring. We're talking about the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the TSA. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the TSA. We know they have special skills. And the Department of Homeland Security. So that because they have special hiring criteria and they are able to establish their own hiring criteria. But what we're going to talk about and what we've heard from everyone on the panel is that obviously there are differences, and to be able to recruit and retain the type of people that we all need and we all want, we have to be receptive and open to those ideas that you have, and we don't want you to start thinking about those ideas. But there is structure involved. Structure is boring. You need to know the rules. If you know the rules, you're able to play the game. Not only play the game, but you're able to play it effectively and efficiently. So mentoring is important. You need to have a mentor. A lot of people aren't comfortable with having a mentor and sharing. Millennials should be, because you need a friend. Let's not call it a mentor, let's call it a friend who's older than you, who has some experience, who's employed, who has goals and aspirations, and who is someone you would like to emulate. So having said all that, I'll turn it back over to the moderator, and we look forward to the additional questions and, of course, your questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Harrison. Now, let me throw out the most practical of incentives here now. Clearly, the majority of the audience today is going to be in the job market here in the very near future, whether it be the public sector, uniform, non-uniform public sector, or the private sector in whatever stripe. You've got 4 true subject matter experts who are instrumental in the hiring process for that job search. So this is an opportunity. It's a rare opportunity kind of to pick the brains of the folks that are going to be responsible for bringing you into these institutions that they're responsible for. So with that thought in mind, let's toss it out to questions and take advantage of the opportunity. Questions for our panelists? Right down here, please.
I'm Chase. I'm the class of 2010 from RPI. And my question is, how do you face the problem of recruiting for that job or task that no one wants to do?
It's a tough one. Have you got anybody in mind particular you'd like to ask this? Or?
Anyone in general.
We'll
I'm just really wondering, because I mean, I've seen a lot of companies go on the track, companies, government, anything go on the track of marketing the job, not with what the job actually is. And I'm just wondering if that's a good choice, a bad choice. What else? What other approaches are there?
Interesting.
There is. I mean, just maybe on the marketing side, a lot of people don't like to do what you'd call the grunt work of the collateral material and things like that. What we try to do is make sure that that's only part of the job. You know, it won't be that would be your one and only job. It might be an entry-level job where you'd start with that, but we would actually expand in discussions with the candidate if they had the ability to do more things. As they tackled that job, we would add more things very quickly to the job itself, just because we know it might be boring. It might be something that, yeah, it's a job that has to get done, and somebody is, that would come into it that would, have a skill set that could move on very quickly. We would add more to it. Just particularly with our brands anyway, we try to make sure that we keep it interesting and keep the person engaged, and not say that, this is something that I don't want to do for a long period of time, and we understand that. That we would move people through. So that would be from a celebrity perspective on something like that. And the example I would give is somebody probably doing collateral work or doing fulfillment work, that would be getting brochures and stuff like that out. We would be looking for them to do other things besides that in a short period of time.
What else?
I would also say that when in doubt, you throw money at it. I'll tell you, I have enlistment bonus money that I vary that probably a few times a year based on what are my hard to fill ratings that I'm struggling. I have qualified people, but they're not necessarily enamored with getting into those ratings, so we offer them more enlistment bonus money to take those jobs. And again, I think the most important point is it may not be what your final ultimate job is, but most of all, the companies up here now, we're talking about fitting people and not filling space. We're trying to get the right fit into the jobs we're looking for, not just filling our coffers with people that are qualified but not doing the specific jobs at hand.
What else? Okay, I think we had one right here.
My question is to the entire panel is, for those of us entering the job market right now, what would you say is the #1 qualification you're looking for someone that pretty much right there and then you would hire that person?
This day and age, innovation is so important that what I'm hearing is we want to hire people with curiosity. And so that's a hard thing to actually determine, but if you can convince an employer that that's part of who you are, then they know you'll be an adaptive thinker and be able to do a lot of things for their company. One thing I learned from a recruiter recently was a lot of senior executives, and so this is even senior executives, not just kids coming out of college, they don't know how to say what they're good at. They really haven't taken the time to figure out how to articulate why me. What do I do to get things done. And so to really coach yourself or work with a mentor to get coached is a good process to go through. To really think about that, and also think about what you're really passionate about.
I agree. Skill sets are, they're, hopefully you're a lifelong learner. You're going to be learning things for the rest of your life. Skill set, which skill set is not really important. We think all of you sitting out here, you have knowledge. Think about what can you do, because employers are looking for doers, and I think flexibility is key. Okay, so be able to translate that knowledge into action. What is it you can do? If you're talking to me, I assume knowledge. I assume that you have spent a reasonable time in an institution of higher learning and you have the ability to think. Now, what can you do? And that's really, really important, because as Brian was saying earlier, it's a performance culture. And we're looking for performers, and that's about doing. Really simple. What can you do? I studied history, and I know a lot about it. What can you do? We don't have a lot of history. I mean, it helps if you know the construct of the government. But what can you do? So think about it in simplistic terms and break your resume down, or at least your interview skills down, to telling them what I can do. What I can do is I can be the best exec, or I can be this. And the level at which you're going to enter. Most companies now have various entry points. Entry level, bottom, mid-level, somewhere at the top, depending upon experience or specific skill set, but it's all around doing. So, to the question over here about bad jobs or jobs that are hard to fill, no such animal. Somebody will take a job. This economy will prove that to you. Just hang around. There will be jobs and there will be people to do the jobs. Now we may have to put lipstick on that pig. But the Admiral was absolutely correct. You can throw money at it. You can show a level of progression or how you will advance and the benefits associated with taking this entry-level position, and that's the way you need to look at these entry-level positions. You're not going to be that way there, and you shouldn't plan to be there forever. You have to be aggressive, I would think, innovative, and have an eye on where it is you want to go. So that focus that you have should not only be for getting the job, but looking beyond the job.
I think it's your communication skills, how well you come across, being enthusiastic, as we were talking about, being passionate, and also being a great communicator. And I also think, in a sense, also a written communicator. I think a lot of times the tie goes to somebody that can really write very well, because a lot of communications in business is also written communications as well, and you might get tested on that. So again, that might be the tie that, in terms of being able to communicate and being able to speak. But if you can write extremely well, companies really look for that too in entry-level people.
Great. Sir.
Thank you. Admiral Rinskoff, President of Class 38. Nobody has talked about the greatest generation. That's mine. However, my question is a here and now question. The Washington Post this morning had a list of about a dozen companies laying off thousands of people. So my question is to all of you, what do recruiters do bringing in people in the face of the fact that your bosses are laying off all these people?
Recruiting in tough times.
Well, I mean, from our standpoint, we're building ships. So we're building, we've got 4 Solstice-class ships that are coming on. We just took our first one. They roughly are 122,000-ton ships, hold 3,000 guests, plus about another 1,500 crew to support those guests, and then probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10% more on land to support those ships in terms of marine operations and everything else. So in a sense, we're a little different, because we're going to continue to, as we bring on these ships every year, one a year for the next 4 years, we're going to have a need to have people and have people fill a lot of different jobs. So in that sense, but we've also gone through onshore, we've gone through our cutbacks too. We've put everything into the onboard experience and making sure that the guest gets really the best experience for why they're purchasing their vacation. But we still do have jobs that might not be at the senior level, but are at entry level positions onshore, and because of our growth, that's what's driving our growth in terms of jobs.
Admiral, I suppose the Navy's hiring, so.
Yeah, but I will tell you what, the competition's keen to get in the Navy today, particularly in the officer corps. I mean, I usually on average have about 250 applicants a year for folks that want to be naval aviators, and I'm usually picking around 75 to 80. So that's pretty tough. Now, I will ask you this. I know many of you are out there. You're all here from great institutions around the country. This is my final pitch, and Admiral, to your point, how many of you are engineers? Raise your hand. I'm hiring. Okay? Engineers, Navy nuclear power, we are hiring. We are building new class of submarines. We're looking for young talent that knows how this equipment works and to go out and not only and run it and make it work at sea. Engineers are in a very precarious situation. The number of engineers in our country are dropping precipitously. People are not studying engineering. I would venture to say if you're an engineer and you're pretty good at your school, you're probably not going to have too much of a trouble getting the job. I would venture to say that. For all those other folks out there, like I was, a history major, a little more challenging. You know, law school wasn't in my future, so flying airplanes was. But I will also tell you in the military, and I'll end on this, you have to be able to take the academic test and look at your scores, but I will also tell you for many of the folks, and not just the Navy, physical fitness is a big deal. And I put a plug in for all of you out there. I mean, I know my 25-year-old has a Nintendo Wii, and he considers that to be a major workout when he's playing it. And actually, I've played him a few games, and it can be. But I will tell you, we have an unbelievable rise in obesity in our country. And the reason we have the health challenges that we do is really important. I will tell you why health is important. Not only to get in the military, you have to be physically fit because you have to be able to call to do some things. But I'll tell you, as you go through life, you need to take care of yourself because at the end of the day, if you're not doing it, who is doing it? So I challenge you all to find some sort of physical fitness activity that you do on a religious basis because our country has an impending health care issue, and it's only going to get worse as the obesity trends in our country go off the Richter scale. Thanks.
Mr. Hackett.
I mean, to tie into being physically fit, I think you have to be mentally agile. Again, getting back to that VUCA concept, that that's the world we're going into. It's not going to get any more uncertain, or less uncertain, rather. But so I think the hard part is there's so many jobs, people applying for jobs, it's actually harder for the employer to deal with the quality they're getting. So they have to do a better job just vetting out because they have options right now. But one of the things we see people looking to do is figuring out, are those people mentally agile, adaptable, so that they can move on to the next thing as the world changes so quickly?
Good point, Mr. Harrison.
I guess in closing, the federal government, on a given day, we post 40,000 jobs every single day, 40,000 new jobs worldwide. And as I said before, those 40,000 jobs, you need to be patient, you need to ask questions. There's a lot of different things on the site that helps us to do a lot of different things, to take skill inventories. What is it you like to do? We talked about passion. You know, find something that you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. You can do that in the government. There will be hurdles, however. There will be frustrations. We learn how to deal with those. But I think that what Brian said is you need to be basically mentally agile. You need to be flexible. You need to be able to do a lot of different things. And to get to the Admiral's question about what does a recruiter say when their company is laying off? Companies that we thought were stable and were going to be here forever are gone for one reason or the other. So you need to be aware of the environment, and that flexibility and agility comes in really, really important. We need all of you in the federal government, believe me, whether you're engineers, you have a medical leaning, because we compete with the private sector for the best and the brightest in all of those. There's jobs in every place. If you're an engineer, you can do any number of things. You can work with NASA. You can work with the patent office. I mean, it goes all over the place as far as engineers, and everybody needs engineers. So make sure you explore all the possibilities and look at all the things that are available to you.
Great. And if you'll be available for the breakouts, I think we could continue this conversation with the individual groups on a more informal basis, I suppose. Absolutely. So, Ryan, off to the breakouts? Great. Thanks. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.